Hello everyone, we're going to go over Chapter 3 today, the media business, consolidation, globalization, and this idea of the long tail. So the media business is highly concentrated into about 6 companies. And with changes in technology, this control is branching out to companies like Google and Yahoo, but it's still largely controlled by the big 6. The U.S. media is unique in the world because the media outlets are almost completely privately owned for-profit companies. In the global media market, most companies are controlled by government agencies. So in Chapter 3, we're going to cover the big 6 media companies, how this plays out on a global level, and the concept of the long tail in the new media marketplace. We will start with a quick history about the development of private ownership and the media and look at the trends, what these trends may mean for the future, and who controls what. Let's look at how private ownership grew throughout U.S. history. The first printing press made its way to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1638, and this was the birth of the Cambridge Press. In the beginning, it was used to publish religious materials that were licensed by the colonial government. Then, the first newspaper was published in the colonies in 1690, and at this time, newspapers didn't have the general audience appeal like they have today, but they really catered to certain groups and reported on things of interest to those groups. A man named Benjamin Harris is credited with the first newspaper. It was called Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. And his paper only lasted for one issue because he failed to license it through the government. Papers grew into a profitable business, but they had really limited readership due to the high price of purchasing them. They were largely subsidized by political parties, and they catered to wealthy people until the 1830s, when the penny press reinvented the system of newspapers. The penny press were low-cost newspapers that catered to a broad audience, and they were able to sell papers for less than it cost to make them, like they do today, by subsidizing costs with advertisements. So this was the first form of mass media that made a profit from advertising revenue, and it created the mold for the future media industries that have emerged. Then, in the 1940s, wireless communication was introduced through the telegraph. The telegraph system was privately owned and an important innovation on the speed of news, and it began the era of electronic communication. By the 1930s, national news was the trend. Between electronic communication like the telegraph and radio, nationwide distribution systems for magazines and other printed materials through the railroads, it was just a lot quicker and easier than ever before to communicate to the masses. And then by the 1950s, TV stations transmitted news and entertainment, and our mass culture really began to form out of these privately owned companies that were subsidized by advertising. This profitable advertising system lended itself to the proliferation of big media companies. So this profitable system of advertising, subsidizing the cost of producing the media itself, has lended itself to the proliferation of really big media companies. And now we have more choices than we ever had before on where to get our news, but the amount of companies producing that news has dwindled down to about 6. In 1983, there were about 50 companies that controlled half of the newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, and music output. Then by 1987, there were only about 29. And then by 2004, about 6. So we have readily available content at every turn that is being pumped out by very few sources. And with the creation of the internet, and the number of sources has grew, and new companies like Apple and Google are joining the ranks of massively huge media companies. So this is that traditional model of mass communication that we talked about. There's one source that goes to many places and many audience members. But like I've said, over and over with the internet, this is changing, and this idea of who produces media has really become very, very democratic. So this consolidation of media has created a system within these companies, these huge companies, called vertical integration. And this is when one corporation controls all aspects of a media product, including the development, the production, delivery, advertising, and promotion. So think of this in terms of Disney. They come up with this idea in their think tank, they produce a media product in their studios, they deliver it to audiences on their cable channel, they advertise it on their channel, and they distribute it through one of their film companies. So this integration of all aspects of a product lends itself to another phenomenon, and that is synergy. Synergy happens when companies use their own outlets to promote other products. So the Disney Channel can show a sneak peek at a new Disney film, or since they recently purchased Marvel Comics, they can put out a new Spider-Man cartoon to help sell Spider-Man toys. And this use of synergy helps keep people attached to the products one company produces. Like Nickelodeon may create a preteen film that is then shown on MTV, so the consumers are then shuffled from Nickelodeon to MTV. When they get a little older, they might shuffle them over to VH1. So synergy is a powerful technique that uses all the tentacles of a company to keep consumers in the boat with them. And vertical integration of all aspects of a media product make this synergy concept a no-brainer for marketing executives. So here are the big six. We have Time Warner, and this is the biggest. Time Warner owns Time Magazine, People, Sports Illustrated, DC Comics, CNN. I mean, just the scope of these companies is insane. Disney is surprisingly number 2 in the bigness of media, and they own Touchstone Pictures, Walt Disney Pictures, Pixar, Miramax. They have theme parks, cruise lines. News Corp, a global company owned by Rupert Murdoch, comes in at number 3. He owns the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, a lot of newspapers. Viacom CBS owns 30 TV stations in 27 cities. CBS Radio, which has 147 radio stations, most of which are in the top 50 markets. They also own MTV, Nickelodeon, Simon & Schuster, Comedy Central, Paramount, Showtime, BET, CMT, a lot of music channels. Bertelsmann is a German media corporation, and unlike the other giants, its focus is mainly on printed publications and music. They're the world's largest publisher of English language books. And then at the bottom there we have NBC Universal, General Electric, Comcast, because they're all part of the same company here. So let's look at Time Warner. In 2008, they had sales of $46.98 billion. So they are a major player in film, television, cable publishing, and online content. They're the home of Scooby-Doo and Harry Potter and Batman. But they have began cutting loose some of their tentacles, like CNN Sports, CNN Money, their residential cable provider company, and AOL, turning AOL into its own company because they found that being bigger isn't always better. And so they just cut some of those companies free. Disney, which came in second in 2008, did $37.84 billion in profit. And we all know the scope of Disney Corporation, from the theme parks, online, Disney Channel, etc. The company has had its ups and downs since the creation of Mickey Mouse to the recent purchase of Pixar from Steve Jobs, which at the time made him the largest Disney shareholder. Then in 2009, Disney added Marvel Comics to their repertoire, so now they own Iron Man, Spider-Man, X-Men, etc. But Apple is a mega giant within itself, and their CEO was the largest shareholder at Disney as well. So you can see how this is transferring over to the newer companies like Apple and Google and Yahoo. News Corporation reported $30.42 billion in sales for 2009. And this company is just a global media powerhouse and has had its hand in every type of mass media that you can possibly think of. News Corp is owned by Australian-born Rupert Murdoch and his family. And Rupert actually became a U.S. citizen because it is illegal for non-citizens to own television networks. It wasn't because he was so impressed with America and wanted to be an American. He just wasn't allowed to own a television network here, and so he became an American citizen. Viacom CBS did $28.5 billion in sales for 2008, with a focus on broadcast TV, cable networks, and films. Viacom was actually born out of CBS, and they are currently considered two separate companies, but the long-standing relationship has left them with overlapping CEOs and executives that run both companies. So Sumner Redstone and his daughter run both of them, and they have purchased each other on and off throughout history, and of course owned Viacom, and then Viacom owned CBS, and now they're separate companies for financial reasons. The German publishing company Bertelsmann did $22.7 billion in 2008, with a focus mainly on printed materials and European broadcasting. They have a cash cow with the wildly popular American Idol and international versions of that show. The company is very old and was started in 1835 with Christian music and prayer books. Then they moved on to printing fairy tales like Grimm Brothers. They have adapted to changing times throughout the centuries, and probably most commonly known to us as BMG Music and later Sony BMG Music Entertainment. NBC Universal is backed by the giant corporation General